So this week you messaged me with an intriguing message with regard to a fight, and Jake Paul has gotten Ben Askren, who I've done my homework on, to agree to a fight in April. So he's given him, and you showed me a few bits of resource to look at, and I've actually done some sniffing around. So what's your initial take
about the fight? I think it's compelling. I think it's interesting from a fight fan's perspective. Ben Askren, for those of you that don't know, is I think he's a two-time national champion. He's an Olympian wrestler. He's a like cream of the crop Olympic wrestler. Came into MMA and basically grabbed a hold of people and ragdolled the shit out of them. Became a world champion in 2 different weight classes in 2 different organizations. And he had a last stint in the UFC, which is the cream of the crop. Unfortunately, he was out for a couple of years trying to get in because of contract disputes. Yeah. Finally got in, won a match, and then got lost. He got lost in one of the most iconic fashions possible with a knee to the head. And basically, you're dealing with someone that is, as far as stand-up skills go, he could be one of the worst stand-up practitioners I've seen, the worst boxers and kickboxers I've seen, because he doesn't need to. He just grabs a hold of people and they're in a grave danger. So what makes it compelling is you've got someone in Jake Paul that has had a couple of fights now, KO'd a NBA player in quite emphatic fashion. He's definitely got some power in his hands. I've not seen any of that from Ben Askren. So it's like, right, okay, you've got this fighter, this wrestler, this MMA cage fighter who's not at all well skilled in boxing on MMA terms, versus someone that's just a YouTuber that actually, for a YouTuber goes, is quite good at boxing skills. How does this marry up? So it really makes for quite a compelling watch. How about you, mate?
So I watched a lot of Ben Askren's fights this week. I've been watching. I've actually watched 4 of his fights. And I've seen clips from all of his fights, and I've actually watched a history on Ben Askren. I really like Ben Askren.
I like Ben Askren.
I like him a lot. Ben Askren to me is the definition of courage and just somebody who backs himself. And the thing I loved about Ben Askren is he didn't feel like he 100% felt he could match himself in the UFC. He felt like, Ultimate Fighter, he was there, but he wasn't willing to compromise. He wasn't able to get the contract, and he went to Thailand to prove himself. And he proved himself in what I learned was a weight class that was actually higher than the weight class he would have been fighting in the UFC. They were fighting up to 185 pounds, whereas in the UFC, that weight class is 175.
It's a little different in that ONE FC have different weight cutting rules.
FC, that's it.
So ONE FC, you have to basically maintain. You have to fight at the weight that you're at now.
Yeah.
Whilst the UFC 175, basically they drain 10, 15 pounds, maybe even more. The day before the fight, they've got 24 hours to kind of get back on track. So in effect, yes, you're right, it's a different weight class, but the weight class system would actually put it nil and void. FC try and look after, they don't want people, they have like hydration tests and all that type of stuff to prevent people cutting shitloads of weight and then try and rehydrate themselves. So
wouldn't that make it a bit more equitable than
that's the argument?
Yeah,
Joe Rogan's big on that, Sean. Joe Rogan is a massive, he's an expert on mixed martial arts, and he stands vehemently by the ONE FC rule. He's a big fan of it and wants to see something similar in the UFC without people shedding shitloads of weight. Just maybe minimal weight, like 5 pounds or something, but trying to have just more of a natural turn up on the day of the fight and fight rather than this peak. This peak perfection.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a load of shit. It's anyway,
healthier for the fighters. That is for certain.
I saw a video on my journey where there was a dangerous method that people use in salt baths, heated salt baths to drop weight fast, and you could kill yourself doing that. And there's fighters that are dropping 10, 12 pounds in like an hour, just sweating it out, and they're in sort of between saunas and salt baths. And to me, that's just very disingenuous to the whole purpose of weight classes. But that, not to digress, but I watched this fight in ONE FC, and the skill level, even let's say he was fighting slightly lesser quality opponents in ONE FC. Let's just make that argument.
Which would be the case.
But his skill level, I think, when I watched it, I was really impressed with his as a wrestler, how good he was on the ground, how good he was when there was multiple instances in his fights where he was locked up and he very quickly turned tables, threw someone over his shoulder, quickly got advantage, and just pounding ground is sort of the mantra of Ben Askren. The other thing that stood out to me was I was impressed at how well he takes a punch. The guy is just really hard to knock out. Like, I don't know, like he was knocked out with that surprise flying knee, and you could argue in that was a fluky fight. You know, it's something that, you know, he should have been ready for, but it was incredible. It was an incredible scene. It was an incredible thing. It's nothing that's ever really happened. So I can kind of give him a pass for that. But the guy is the real deal in the ring when it comes to MMA. I watched the one fight I watched, and this was just watching it, was Damian Maia versus Ben Askren. Ben Askren. The reason I watched that was Damian Maia and Ben Askren. It was the first time it was a bit of a stand-up fight between two, because they were both wrestlers and they were both mediocre.
No, so Damian Maia is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expert, and Ben Askren is a wrestling expert. Those are two different skills. They're both grappling, but they're different.
Sorry, and very right to correct me. So for anybody who's watching this, I'm really cutting my teeth on MMA, mixed martial arts. So I think they're not stand-up fighters.
It's all for stand-up though. You're right.
Yeah, but they both are very wary about each other's abilities on the ground, and that turned into. And the reason I went to that was the few things I read about that fight when I was reading about comparing Ben Askren in a boxing ring. This was the fight to look at to see Ben Askren's boxing prowess, because that's the longest he stayed on his feet at any match.
Correct,
I actually have it here. I've saved the fight. I've got it up here to show.
Okay, cool.
So I'm just going to play this with the mute on. And
hello there, everyone.
That's not what I wanted. Hold on one second. Hold on. Production issues already.
Yeah, you bring that up. So yeah, Damian Maia is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. That's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the art form to counter wrestling. So it's not great for. That was always going to be hell of a matchup for Ben Askren. All fights stand on their feet. So that's where this stood, and it kind of stayed, as you said rightly, for a while. I think they're both quite respectful of the other person's skills. Damian Maia has been doing stand-up for longer, but he's not. I mean, no one would class Damian Maia as, like, you know, well accomplished on his feet. He can handle himself and would kick the shit out of me, but for MMA, you wouldn't be scared of him on his feet.
And watching this fight, I watched this, and it was a really good fight. But I also then went to. I'm going to jump back to watching this, because the next thing I want to lead to is where do you think this is going to go? So I'm going to play something else that I just think it's apt to what we're talking about. And that's Jake Paul in the last couple months training as a boxer. So this is a very different skill set. You know, I'm not an MMA expert, but I think we can both agree that most people will know boxing and MMA are just not even in the same ballpark as far as skill set. They're ring-based activities or sports, but boxing is I think boxers would never survive in the MMA ring. I think it's easier to translate MMA into boxing than boxing to MMA to have a fair fight.
Not even an argument.
Yeah. So where do you stand on? I guess let's jump into it. Where do you see this going? How do you see this fight coming to pass? Because there was a good point on that video that you sent me that Jake Paul has given Askren 2 months to prep for this fight. He's not said in the next month. He said 2 months. So Jake Paul must back himself.
I find this fascinating from a combat perspective, because Jake Paul is explosive. He has some explosive power. So he knocked out an NBA player. So he didn't knock out a boxer. We haven't seen him against someone tried and tested. Let's look at the pros of Jake Paul. Like, he is more of an athlete. The stuff he's doing that we're watching right now, I think he's going to do much more comfortably than what Ben Askren to do. Ben Askren is a wrestler first and foremost, you know. So there's that explosive energy which you see off a lot of wrestlers. Ben Askren doesn't have. He's not genetically built with knockout punch power. However, in Ben Askren's favor, he's an MMA fighter. He's been knocked out once with a flying knee to the head, and has not been knocked out by. He's had loads of people that know how to punch, and they've not knocked him out. And they're wearing 4-ounce gloves, Sean. They're not boxing gloves. He's getting punched in the face with you know, barely anything on. So
Yeah.
Jake Paul is going to have to go some to knock him out. Ben Askren knows more than what the average Joe like me and you. He knows more than what we think. You know, he'll probably be surprised. But all he's trying to do, he's not trying to knock Damian Maia out there. He's trying to. These are like setup punches as well. To do this, to do that. So now that's taken out of the realm back to boxing. So there's something else. There's just one thing to focus on. So I don't see Ben Askren knocking out Jake Paul whatsoever. But what I could see happening in Askren's case is him being outboxed potentially and making it a dirty fight, leaning on him, wrestling on him. Because with boxing, you do have that element to that. You know, you've got the clinch game and the dirty boxing side of it, and that's going to be to Ben Askren's favor. He can make it a muggy match. Now, how is Jake Paul going to handle? I don't know how many rounds it was actually, Sean. Was it 8 or 5? I can't remember. But
I don't know. I can find out.
Later on, if he starts to get a little tired and worn on, you know, we've not seen that yet. Well, Ben Askren, we've seen, you know, he's had 3-round, 5-round fights, and he's an athlete.
8 rounds, by the way.
It is 8 rounds. So what's going to happen in round 7 or 8? But it is fascinating because Jake Paul could punch. He could, you know, he could legitimately knock someone out. It's just, is his skill level going to match someone like Ben? It's very interesting.
Watching this, I found looking at Jake Paul. So Jake Paul is taking an interesting path here. If we look at Jake Paul first, let's talk about Jake Paul and let's talk about Ben Askren and what they're bringing. Actually, no, let me jump into Jake Paul because you started talking about Ben Askren. So Ben Askren, when I watched him, as somebody who's watched a bit more boxing, he very much leads every punch like a lot of amateurs do in some degree. Then part of that is interesting you said that because he's trying to grapple at the same time. He's leading, a lot of his punches are very head-led and they're very flaily. And
different intentions.
Yeah. And when I think I sort of changed my view on that because when I saw his punches, it looked very just sort of amateurish in a way because he's coming forward like this. And I thought, okay, well, with the was it 8-ounce gloves, 12-ounce gloves? How big are the gloves that they're going to be using?
In boxing, I don't know what they're using. Maybe 12-ounce. I mean, it's considerably more than the UFC.
Yeah. So my first question when I watched this was, are these punches with 12-8, whatever the boxing glove that's going to be used is that going to be enough to trouble Jake Paul? Because he's not really been hit by a professional fighter before. And are the punches that Ben Askren is throwing as a wrestler, watching this, are these to the degree that a boxer would throw them? So he's going to hit him, in my view, with a jab that's going to be serious. But is he going to be able to throw a knockout punch on Jake Paul? Those are questions I have. And is he going to have the skill to score? Or is he going to need to depend on a knockout? My feeling is, based on how we're seeing them training, is Ben Askren's going to really have to land some scoring blows because I don't know that his jab or his punch is going to be enough with the glove to knock out Jake Paul. That's my first question. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've just not seen enough of Ben Askren boxing to know for sure is where I'm at. This is about as much as you've seen. And again, it doesn't look great from a beginner's perspective, but we have to bear in mind that he isn't a boxer. He's not trying to box. No. He's trying to set up his wrestling game, his dominating game. Jake Paul, we've not seen on the other set. We've not seen him being dragged into deep water. There's a difference with him fighting fellow YouTubers and a fucking ex-NBA star versus like a proper cage fighter. That's what makes it so compelling because he's got youth and explosion on his side, and he looks like he's got some technique to him. He looks more explosive and better on the pads than Ben does. But look, pads aren't punching you in the face. Like, you know, like Mike Tyson famously said, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So, you know, this looks good because no one else is punching him in the face. What happens if Ben cracks him in the nose or headbutts him and he cuts his eye and there's blood streaming down his face? Does he know what it's like to bleed? Like, because Ben Askren does. Like, Ben Askren has like been in the trenches his entire life with wrestling. Like, he's not scared of anyone. He would get in the ring with anyone. Like, Jake Paul is ultimately a YouTuber, and he might be a fucking hard and explosive YouTuber, but this is what makes it so compelling, mate. It's you know, I really don't know where it's going to go, if I'm being honest with you. I don't think Jake Paul is going to knock him out. And I've not seen enough of Ben Askren to actually see what he can do. And I'm very intrigued as well. What's the weight difference between these two? Do we know?
Yeah, actually, well, I think, well, Jake Paul, I know the height and reach. Jake Paul is 6'2", 6'3". Ben Askren is 5'10", and I think there's a good 20 pounds between them. And by the way, we may have to. I can't play any more of you because I've just gotten. I'll just show you the message I've gotten on my phone. For anybody who wants to see the magic behind.
I can't see it. What was it? Can you read it out?
Yeah, it says UFC blocked your video because it may contain content that they own. Which I thought that was a ONE FC fight that we were watching.
That's a UFC one.
Ah, okay. So I played from YouTube a UFC fight. So I may not now be able to play this back in a separate video. Man, it's so hard to do this. But looking at this Jake Paul Ben Askren fight, so I'm going to have to stick with we've seen enough of Ben Askren now. YouTube is 100% going to block this now. Where it goes from here, I think, is we look at Jake Paul. I agree with that. He's not had a real fight, and this is where he is. I've watched a few interviews with Jake Paul in the last week, and I underestimated his intelligence. Now that doesn't mean that I think he's a good person or I like him, but his craft and his thinking in this game is next level. So he has the mind of to be like a Tyson Fury mentally. He knows how the game works. He can get these fights underway. But he's taken a weird route if he wants to be a professional boxer, because he's taking fights with people that aren't boxers, that don't have that craft and don't have that hand speed and don't have that devastating, combination that he's going to be working himself up to a fight that he can't handle. And I think this is a fight that he can very much handle. I think this is a fight where it's going to probably go the distance. I think it's going to be very ungratifying in some regards because I don't see Ben Askren, from what I've seen, and you'll know better than me, but I don't see Ben Askren putting in a lot of scoring punches nor troubling Jake Paul with a knockout given the reach and size advantage. But I don't see Jake Paul knocking out Ben Askren because Ben Askren was hit with every fight I watched him, he was punched square in the face with those little mittens that they wear. And how many fights I thought, yeah, he's done, and he wins the fight ultimately in ONE FC, but that's after getting knocked square in the nose with a knuckle. So he's not going to get knocked down. And I think very much where this is going is Jake Paul wins by points, and it's going to be a little bit ungratifying.
I think it's going to. I don't think it's going to make for a great viewing.
No,
I think that Ben Askren will surprise a lot of us. I think he'll be better than we expect. Like I think we'll see some combos and some stuff like, oh, okay, yeah, no, okay, he knows what he's doing. I think there'll be a few of those moments, but I think there's going to be a lot of grabbing. I think there's going to be a lot of hugging. There'll be a lot of talking from both of them. I think they'll be both talking shit to each other. Yeah. There's going to be mental warfare in a lot of this, but that size thing you told me is quite interesting as well. If they got that size discrepancy, honestly,
4-inch reach difference. 4-inch reach difference.
Well, that happens in the UFC. 4 inches is okay. I think that to have like 4 inches taller and did you say he's 20 pounds heavier?
Let me check that because I remember the height and I remember the reach. So the reach is 4 inches and the height is 3.5 inches. They have slightly different in their bios heights, but I think largely Ben Askren's 5'10", 5'11", Jake Paul 6'2", 6'3", which is substantial.
So against Nate Robinson, he came in at 189, is what they're saying. So actually, do you know what? They're going to be about the same because Askren was fighting at welterweight at 170, which is 15 pounds less, but he cut weight for that.
So says he's 170 on Wikipedia.
Yeah, who is
Ben Askren. So he's probably only like 10 pounds here or there.
That's what he fought at. So he's going to be 10, 15 pounds more than that at fucking least. He'll probably be like 20 pounds. So their weight is probably going to be about the same. But another point that I think you got to mention as well is that this isn't a fit Ben Askren. He's come off hip surgery, so that was one of the reasons that he retired because of his health. So he's just had a hip operation, and he's going to go into a boxing fight. So how's that going to play out? I mean,
he's been coaching wrestling.
Yeah. He's not the most mobile person anyway, and now he's just had hip surgery and then going into boxing, which is heavily movement orientated. And Jake looks like he's got some bounce, but my point I want to make, Sean, is I've got massive respect for both of these dudes
Yeah.
because Jake Paul is taking on a legit cage fighter world champion. Ben Askren is no fucking mug. And yet, on the flip side, Ben Askren really is just putting his reputation on the line to fight some explosive YouTuber. He doesn't need to do this, and he's fighting him in not his specialty. He has everything to lose in this. If he beats him up, what's he won? It'll just from the fact that I've just shut this kid up, which is really the only reason, the motivation that he has. But he has a lot to lose in this. So I have respect for both of these guys.
With Jake Paul, he's chosen Ben Askren for a reason. It is the smartest fight he could have taken. And I can't think of, and I don't know the player, so this is going to be a stupid thing for me to say. I can't think of anyone better. But this, from what I've seen from Ben, if I'm Jake Paul going into this, and I respect his confidence, I don't think his confidence is misplaced. I think he feels like because he's taken on some cream puff, inexperienced non-boxers and knocked them out. Three people, 3 knockouts. Big fucking deal. You're taking on somebody that you won't be able to knock out. If Jake Paul knocks him out, then that changes quite a lot of my view on him as a boxer moving forward. Because there's people that didn't have gloves on that couldn't knock him out.
I agree.
And he's a tough guy, but he's taken on somebody who, when you compare him to Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor is more of a stand-up fighter anyway, but Conor McGregor against Floyd Mayweather looked a totally different prospect in the ring against Floyd Mayweather. And I think Ben Askren is going to look very much like an inexperienced boxer. And this is what Jake Paul has been training like a professional boxer for the last year. That's going to mean something, especially with his size, his reach. It's going to be a massive advantage to equal the playing field. And if anything, I just don't see any other result other than Jake Paul on points. I don't see it happening.
Really? Okay. I could see Ben Askren beating him. I could see him dragging him into deep water. And Jake Paul, what's Jake Paul like after 6 rounds? Has he been beat? I mean, I've not seen. Maybe he does go to that level, but has he been beaten up before? Because I tell you what, any wrestler, they create the hardest human beings on the planet, and this is an Olympian wrestler. He's about as hard as they come. So he knows what it's like to get dragged down. And we got a comment there, mate, as well. Might as well stick that up.
No, it's the first time we've had a sport comment.
Yeah, let's get it up there.
Jake will win. It will not go the distance. Steven, I don't know. Have you watched Ben Askren's fights and how many times he's gotten punched in the face with nigh on bare knuckles and not gone down?
Yeah, to be fair, I can see where it's coming from because you're watching someone look very explosive, and he knocked out Nate Robinson quite in dramatic fashion, but Nate Robinson isn't Ben Askren, and he's taken a lot of punches. So I could see it going both ways. I'm just intrigued with it. I'm not swaying too heavily on either side.
I just think Jake Paul is going to have combinations. He's going to have, he's going to be training, training specifically to score points. I think his side are going to be smart enough. Jake has impressed me with his decision making, even how and why he challenged. I saw an interview where, this is slightly digressing a bit, where he talked about how he went personal with Conor McGregor and trying to get him to fight. And I'll have to show you the link for it because the story was interesting, because the management for Conor McGregor said, "Who is this kid?" According to Jake, of course, "Send me proof of funds." And Jake Million is minted. He's got the money. Especially, he's got people that'll back him because the McGregor-Jake Paul fight will make a killing. So he sent the proof of funds. And then the guy, it was the ESPN MMA channel, which has been brilliant for me to get me up to speed. And the guy said, "Well, why did you take it so personally?" And he said, "Conor McGregor, you were saying this about Khabib and his girlfriend, how he's taking it personal about religion, about him being a Muslim. So why can't I make it personal? I want to rile him up. I want to get him in the ring." He's a switched on guy. He's going to have the best trainers money can buy. They're going to be focused on the fact that Ben Askren is not a boxer. They're going to be focusing on points. They're going to know, if I know that he's not going to be knocked out, they're going to know that. And they're going to be playing for the points game.
This is my counter to that, is that Jake isn't tested. So you can come. Everyone has a game plan. Mike Tyson. Everyone has a game plan until they're punched in the face. So when Ben Askren accidentally headbutts him, drags him, is wrestling him, leaning on him, wearing him down, and he feels fatigue makes cowards of us all. It's another saying, and I have experienced that. I felt fatigue, and I just want to give up. It's having that broken feeling. Ben was trained to be broken, and this guy, that's where the levels are. The skill sets that we're seeing I don't think you can stand back and watch both of those guys on the pads and be blown away with what Ben Askren can do, although I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
But just from a stand-up, he lacks explosive, he lacks technique and sharpness. Jake's got youth, he's exuberant, you know, but what's he like up here when it comes to it? Ben Askren, we do not doubt that, because he's almost been knocked out and come back and beat the shit out of fucking savages. We've not seen this guy. He's untested. So there's a comment there which I think
Robinson was very weak. Robinson, and I saw the 2 minutes of that fight. Robinson looked like somebody who just learned how to box versus somebody who's been training to box.
That's why I'd agree with that. Yeah.
This fight will definitely test Jake. And by the way, by me, and I agree with that, and by me saying, Hugh, that it's going to go to the distance, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but if I were to take into account that the fitness element is something that I didn't raise, you raised that. That's something that I was thinking about. I think being an older person, coming off of surgery, and boxing, I think in MMA, and you might be able to correct me if this is wrong, there's more chances, it's a longer rounds, but there's also chances to catch your breath in a grappling situation. And I think in boxing, there's a lot of footwork and a lot of dancing. And I think that's why I think this is going to be not a compelling watch, because I think there's going to be a lot of, I think Ben Askren is going to tie him up like crazy and just keep working the body. That's what I think is going to happen. And they're not going to be scoring punches.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. It'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. But as far as a showcase for boxing, that it will not be. I'm almost certain of that. But we'll see. You know, who knows? But I'm going to be watching it for sure.
Robinson looked like me when I went to my local civic center and put on the gloves to spar. I didn't see it, but I think Robinson, he did. He looked like just like a child in there. And Jake Paul, like he looked like, you know, Raging Bull. I mean, it was just like, and I'm not a Jake Paul fan. It didn't go well at all. But it didn't. That's I remember I put on when I was playing American football, I had this guy that he was a mixed martial arts guy. I don't know what he was working on, what his discipline was, but we put on boxing gloves, and he was one of those guys that like he's a lovely guy. But we were in like the rec room in the dorm, and I got the gloves on and I was just jabbing, and he all of a sudden did this spinning backhand and hit me upside the head right here. And I could just hear my ears ringing right away. And we stopped right away, but it was just like, okay, I can't do this. I'm bigger than you. If we were, you know, in a proper fight, I think you kicked my ass because you knew how to throw a punch.
I did stand up for a little bit. I did way more grappling. The stand up for me is just, again, I wasn't like a natural stand up guy, and being punched in the face is horrible. And I didn't even really enjoy punching people in the face. That was another thing. That didn't feel natural. Choking someone, grabbing their arm and manipulating them, I love that. But something like the punching, I didn't kind of warm to. But one of the coaches he called me in. He said, "All right, spar with me. It's my ride. Come with me." I was like, "Oh, fucking!" And this guy has an edge to him. He's put it this way. He scared me. He was a coach, but he scared me. Like, he's a 6'4", 6'3", and he's a cage fighter, and he's got like, you wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of him. Like he had like a nastiness kind of to him. Really nice guy, good coach, but you want to fuck with this guy. And I was like, is he going to try and teach me a lesson now? And I'm like, in my head, like, I was shitting myself. I was like, I don't know what to do. And he just, for the first half of it, he just kept backing off and just dodging my punches and moving and like ducking. And I was like getting my confidence and like feeling around. And I was like, oh, this isn't too bad actually. You know, and then the second half, he put pressure on me. He started you could see his eyes change, and he started walking forward to me, like walking me down and hesitating and like moving. And I was like, fucking hell. And I started like losing my ability. I was like, the hands went down and he was like smiling. He said, it's okay, just relax. And like, he talked to me at the end. He said, you know, you looked okay when you were moving forward, but if I put any pressure on you, you said you fell to shit. I was like, that's exactly what happened. Yeah. And I was like, I have so much to learn. And that was on me trying to put stuff into practice. So that's just to illustrate that I've been, you know, I've not been in a fight, but I've been in some of those like sparring situations where I've seen the changes. So my point being is, what is he going to be like when his eye is lit open or his nose is smashed? Maybe Ben could do it accidentally as well, and catches him a couple of times and there's blood dripping down and he can't breathe through his nose anymore. Ben knows how to deal with that. Does Jake? That's the interesting factor. But you know, Jake is athletic, and he looks like
Jake was a state champion wrestler. He was a
He's no
state
much.
champ wrestler.
He's not. He's a UFC caliber athlete, but he's an average Joe athlete for certain.
To be in America, to be a state champion wrestler, that's one short of Olympics. So state champions are ones who go into the Olympics. So I'm not saying he can hang with Ben Askren as a wrestler, but he has experience what Ben Askren has in those grind out fights against what would be he's a big dude, Jake Paul. He would have gone up against people that were in on the mat.
But
wrestling is I tried wrestling for a week and it fucked me up.
It's like a harder sport. UFC athletes say that the hardest time in training was when they were wrestlers and not now as UFC fighters. Well, you think, how does that make sense? But being a wrestler non-stop and the grind is arguably the hardest sport on the planet. Now, you have to attest that, yes, I tip my hat off to Jake Paul. He'd kick the shit out of me. But there's differences between state champions and national champions. And there are differences between national champions and Olympic medalists. And like that, there are always layers to these things, right? And like you have to give Jake's a certain level of kudos, but Ben Askren is on a different tier from what he's accomplished in the combat world.
Okay. So I've made a prediction. You've been sitting on the fence a bet. I want a prediction from you.
Okay. What's my prediction? So you're going Jake Paul.
I'm going Jake Paul by points.
Yeah. Okay.
An ugly point win.
Look, I'm going to make this fun, and I'm going to say Ben Askren by points. I'll really? Say I could see it going both ways, but I'll make this fun, and I there's enough in it for me to back Ben.
Well, we're going to replay this no matter what the outcome when we do the post-fight breakdown of Askren Paul.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely will.